With essential goods increasing by double digits, inflation is getting out of hand. Energy prices are up by 34% compared to last year, gasoline is up by 49%, and of course, also new vehicle prices are up. In an attempt to temper all of this, the Fed started to increase rates, but the effectiveness of this measure is yet to be seen. Increased prices for new vehicles are primarily driven by the famous supply chain constraints. Auto manufacturers can't produce enough cars to satisfy demand. And as we know from Economics 101, this means that prices go up. I'm sure you're aware that it's almost impossible to buy a car below MSRP or even at MSRP. And that might be justified for a limited edition Ferrari, but not for your everyday Nissan or Toyota. It's then also no surprise that consumers are sick of it. Many of them, and especially low-income groups, are pushed out of the market, and this is now showing up in the numbers. People are done with these prices. So let's see what happened in the new vehicle market and if this change in consumer sentiment might mean that we will see a drop in sales and perhaps even a drop in prices. We start with the obvious. Prices for new cars are crazy as they increased by 33% during the last 5 years. Over here you can see that the average transaction price was $34.4 thousand in May 2017 and that it is now $47.1 thousand. Now it is natural for prices to trend up as they follow inflation. And we also need to keep in mind that new cars are getting bigger and bigger and more technologically advanced. And this is of course also pushing prices up. Yet, the increase in the last 2 years deviates from the normal trend and pushed prices to levels that are unaffordable for many. I by the way need to mention that this graph over here and many of the other graphs that you will see in this video are from Cox Automotive mid-year market review. You can head over to their website and check out the full presentation if you want to know more. Now as I mentioned, increasing prices is nothing new, and this is also not a problem as long as income rises with it. It starts to be a problem when the increase in income doesn't match the increase in the prices. And that is what happened during the last 2 years. Over here we have the Vehicle Affordability Index that shows the number of weeks of median household income needed to purchase an average new vehicle. And we can see that, historically, this number has been fairly stable, even though that prices trended up. Between 2017 and mid-2020, it fluctuated between 32 and 34 weeks. Yet, since the pandemic price surge, the number of weeks needed increased to 41.3. And compared to May 2017, this is an increase of 25.2% and at the same time also a new all-time high. With 41 weeks, the indicator is getting awfully close to 52 weeks, or in other words, a year. Consumers had enough of this. The most recent increases seem to have been the final push as the intention to buy a new vehicle fell off a cliff. Over here we have the development of the intention to purchase a new vehicle, the intention to purchase a used vehicle, and the General Consumer Sentiment Index. Since January 21, the intention to purchase a new or used vehicle has been fairly stable. Yet, values plummeted during the last 3 months. Especially the drop in the new purchase intention looks like a trend breach and hereby indicates that prices might be too inflated. So does this mean that new vehicle demand will suddenly plummet and that no one will buy a new car? Well, not necessarily. This data is based on survey results and only measures the intentions. And as we all know, we don't always do what we intend to do. But we also can't fully dismiss this data. There's namely a significant group of people who is now pushed out of the market and are no longer able to purchase a new vehicle. Over here we have the share of new vehicle sales split by income group, and this reveals that the lowest income group has been making up less and less of the market share and that this trend accelerated when new vehicle prices surged. Back in 2016 it was around 40%, while it is currently down at 25%. This group is priced out of the market. Now you don't need to be an economic expert to realize that it is this low income group that is hit the hardest and the first by the rising inflation. Moreover, it shows in the data. Over here we have the checkable deposits for each income group, based on data from the Fed. The data is indexed to the end of 2019, so the most orange bars on the left of each category. The blue bars show the situation of Q1 2022. And you can see that for all income groups, with exception of the lowest one, the amount of money in checkable deposits increased tremendously. In plain English, this means that the top 4 income groups have way more money saved up than they had at the end of 2019, while the lowest income group has less saved up. Alright, so far we saw that new vehicles are more unaffordable than ever and that the intention to purchase one plummeted. At the same time, we also saw that people have a lot of savings, with exception of the low income group. They saw a decrease in their savings, and unsurprisingly, the share of new vehicles sold to this income group decreased drastically. And car manufacturers know this. The pandemic namely accelerated the shift to more expensive cars. They also know that you must smash this like button if you would like to support the channel. So if you like this video, please click on the like button down below. Thank you. But now then, let's talk about the shift to more expensive cars. Over here we have the share of the new vehicle market split per MSRP price range. And this reveals that the low MSRP range saw a drastic decrease. In 2012, 55% of the new vehicle market had an MSRP of less than $40,000, while it currently sits at 16%. Likewise, the market share for cars over $50,000 increased a lot. You can see that this trend already started way before the pandemic, so it is not just the supply shortage that pushes prices up, it is also the product mix of the car manufacturers. The high-end market is simply more profitable. The recent supply shortages just accelerated the shift to this market, as it allows car manufacturers to reach approximately the same targets while delivering less cars. You see, total new vehicle sales are still way below pre-pandemic levels and also still way below demand. It's a seller's market. If we look at the incentive in percentage of the transaction price and the transaction price relative to MSRP, we can see that the incentives are down, while cars are on average selling above MSRP. And this, in combination with a focus on high-end cars, all helps to meet financial targets. There are differences between the manufacturers, but in general the industry is not in a bad shape. Look for example at the 2022 monthly transaction revenue in red. It is not far off from 2019, which was the last normal year. Hence, the situation for car manufacturers is not as bad as it might seem initially. Now the big question you probably would like an answer to is when new vehicle prices finally start to come down. Well, I think it's unlikely that we will see MSRP prices come down, but we should see prices come down to MSRP levels eventually. But this will only happen when the supply issues are solved or when demand falls so far that it meets current supply levels. Starting at the supply side, a recent report from McKinsey dismantles the current situation and concludes that the shortages are driven by a combination of structural factors that already existed prior to the pandemic, but also by the over-ordering of automotive companies. OEMs and Tier 1 suppliers are expected to place orders for enough automotive chips to outfit about 120 million new cars, but the annual vehicle sales are forecasted to be about 83 million. And this of course creates a typical bullwhip effect that only exacerbates the problem. We already discussed this many times on the channel. On top of all of this comes the predicted shortages for other items such as electric steel. In short, expert consensus seems to be that the industry needs to drastically rethink its approach to supply chain management and that these shortages won't disappear by itself. The expectancy is then also that the chip shortage won't end before 2022 or 2023. It depends a bit on the source you look at. But one caveat over here is of course the willingness of automotive manufacturers to go back to the previous situation. After all, their margins are pretty decent now and some manufacturers already communicated that they will continue to create an artificial scarcity, even when the supply issues are solved. The question is of course, will they really do this? According to Cox Automotive, plants are currently running at 40 to 65% capacity, and that is not a desirable number. Moreover, previous economic shocks such as the dot-com bubble and the financial crisis showed us that manufacturers tend to ramp up quickly after major downturns. But what about the demand side? We saw that the intention to purchase a new vehicle plummeted. Now as a start we need to recognize that an intention doesn't always materialize into a behavior. I think we all know that intention of not eating that cookie but end up eating that cookie. Likewise, the massive drop in the intention indicator did not result in a massive drop in new vehicle sales. Yet, for the first time in a year, the credit availability dropped slightly, and this means that it was a bit harder to get credit for a car loan. A continued deterioration of the access to credit might of course help to decrease demand. Currently it sits still close to an all-time high. And with that, let's wrap up and conclude. New cars have never been more unaffordable, and prices have been pushed up by a mismatch between demand and supply and by manufacturers focusing more on the upper market segment. And unfortunately, this means that the lowest income groups are pushed out of the market. However, the majority of the income groups saw their savings increase tremendously, yet they seem to be sick of the high prices. The intention to buy a new car fell off a cliff. The good news over here is that we are likely to be close to a tipping point, but the bad news is that it is likely to be a gradual adjustment. On the supply side, things are moving very slowly, but the worst appears to be behind us. On the demand side, we can see the first signs of a tightening credit availability, and this might play a role when it really materializes. But again, we need to be realistic here. Movements on the supply and the demand side does not mean that new cars will suddenly become affordable. But we should be moving to a situation where you can get a car at MSRP. But what about the situation in the used car market? That's a complete different story, as we can finally see that prices are coming down and that cars start to depreciate. But more about that in a few weeks. Also, before I end the video, I need to mention that this video covered the situation on the normal car market. So for the cars that you use every day. There will be a separate video on the exotic car market, so stay tuned for that one. And with that, we arrived at the end of this video. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week for a new video.